will go public. My API connection, my application program interface will work from my Zoom to my YouTube. And it's done recreating, and then I have even a YouTube live, and we are broadcasting live to YouTube. Perfect. So that's working out. This meeting is being live streamed. They're able to tell us that, and we're ready to go. And TJ and Coral and Kaying are cameras, and we're ready to go. So today, also, I want to make sure that we all know that we're on October 9th. I believe that's a Monday. We are having exam 1. We will have our exam in person in the School of Business Lab, the Stubblefield 204. So we'll have that on October 9th. I want to make sure that everybody knows, even though this class is online, number one, all of our exams will be in person. So we'll be together for our exam. We'll be doing it. It'll be 2 parts. One part will be multiple choice, like the adaptive exams, like the quizzes. The next part will be open-ended, like some of our assignments. And before we do the exam, I will do a review sessions with you, giving you what will be covered, and especially on the open-ended, I will cover with you what will be covered on the open-ended. So if I give you like 2 questions, I'll give you in advance like 4 questions, and you know, probably out of the 4, 2 will be given. So because this is a lot of information, don't you agree? When you think about it, Nick, there's so much there. You say, hey, how can I even study? So I want to narrow it down, and then spend afterwards, after that first exam, spend some more time on projects. So that's number 1. We have that. Hopefully Elias and George, I'll be able to see their faces. Kay-Ing, I see kind of like half your face. Good. I see now all of your face. And James, you're always a little low there. Now I see your chin as well. Okay, so we're ready. Any questions before I begin? Otherwise, we'll start, and hopefully we'll get that. We'll take, at the end, we'll take attendance, and then we'll start. So let's do a couple of housekeeping chores here. I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to go into my Chrome browser, and as you can see, you see yourself. We can see that we're a little bit delayed. Why? Because there's a latency here. Not only are we going, there's a latency a little bit through the computer, and then through the YouTube, there's another latency. And now if I go to BTE210-J, we can see of what's due, making sure that on Wednesday, September 20th, which is this Wednesday, you've done the readings of chapter 5. It's all about data. It's all about data, the assignment that we talked about, the quiz, the PowerPoint. And then I will also on Wednesday, today I'm going to talk about data. On Wednesday, I'll start thinking about big data. What is it a good example for big data? And I'm going to use the stock market for big data. What's better than big data than the stock market? And we'll also start talking about automated trading systems. What's an algorithm there? And you have a couple of readings here where in these readings, I want you to think about what is automated trading systems and what are the pros and cons. I'll be going the second part of that. I'll be talking on Wednesday. This part I will be talking about the data here. Okay. And then if you know, if I go to Wiley Plus, and I can go to chapter 5, for all the, another way in which you can study is if you go all the way down, you know your data adaptive assignments, you also could go to flashcards. And when you go to flashcards, you can see on chapter 5, you can see here on those, they have something called a quiz. So under the flashcards, they have something called a quiz. And then you can see a characteristic of interest that it describes an entity. You can try these, out. And if you submit, it tells you, oh, incorrect. And then if you say to yourself, oh, maybe it's here, and you go incorrect, you can submit, and you can take it as many times as you want, right? That you're available. You say, okay, you can take it as many times as you want. And then you can say here, correct. A characteristic of interest describes an entity is a record, and we'll be starting today to talk about that. So you can see that that is part of it. You can go up to the top and you can see here on managing data. This brings you to the book. You can go to the bookshelf. It brings you to the book of Wiley, and it starts talking about managing the data and how it's difficult. So let's go to the PowerPoint here. And as you can see, you can download, of course, right? Everybody knows here, you can go to the PowerPoints, and under the PowerPoints, the 9th edition, you can do the chapter 5. So I'm going to go through this a little bit so we can understand what do we mean when we're talking about data and why is that going to be important. We'll be discussing the challenges of data, identifying advantages and disadvantages of databases, what is big data, what is a data warehouse, how we can implement that as well, and how we can do that. So the outline for today is managing data, the database approach, big data, data warehouses, and that's what I'll cover here. So let's think about it. So Lauren, when I think about data, we really think about ways in which, why is it difficult to manage data? It's difficult to manage a lot of things in our life, but what is it about data? So let's think about it, Lauren. Let's think about an organization that is not only dear to our hearts, but that we all know about. We can talk about one organization that we all know, and that I'm going to use our university. So Lauren, who in the university has any data about you? Let's start.
The president.
Okay, so and what does the president have access? Does he have access about us directly? Maybe the president's office.
Yeah.
The president's office. And there's like president fellows. Have you ever heard of that, Lauren?
Mm-hmm.
Is there anyone in the class that's a president's fellow? Put it in the chat. Put it in the chat if you're a president's fellow. They have something called like the president's fellows. They basically work kind of, is there anybody in the chat that is one, Lauren? Does anyone president?
I don't see one yet.
Okay, so there's the president. Who else has data about you? Any other?
Are you still talking to me?
Yeah.
like Kane Central or the
Well, let's
scholarship
think about it. Let's
office?
think about like departments. Who, Michaela, do you think has data about the students?
The health department.
Okay, the health center, right? Health centers. And a lot of you have even sent me notes that you've been sick and so forth, right? In the health center. Okay. And in the health center, let's put even this case on data. There's data here. We talked about there's data roles. And basically the caveat of data roles is the need to know. So we talked about it, the idea, remember, Michaela, I have the need to know of all of the grades of the students in my class. Do I have the need to know, Michaela, your grades in other classes?
No.
No, right? Do you have the need to know your grades in my class?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, but you don't have the need to know of everyone else's grades in my class. So it's all the need to know. So the health center has something called, let's even go to Google here. Something called HIPAA, which is the Health Insurance Portability and Accounting Law Act. It's a federal law that protects sensitive patient health information. So basically the law was passed that requires some standards to protect health patient knowledge being without the patient's consent or knowledge. So for instance, when I have that law, that HIPAA law, is a law that requires the health center not to share, Michaela, not to share health data with anyone that doesn't have the need to know. And even if you see then, Michaela, that when someone's sick, I can't go and ask the health center who in my class has COVID. Do you know that? I don't have the need, I don't have the right to know that, right? You can then give me permission, or you can tell me, someone in the class can say, you know, I went to the doctor, here's the note from the doctor. So that is kind of like when we think about it, the need to know. So when I think about that part is that need to know, we have something called data governance, that in order to manage data, we have something called data governance. And the idea of data governance is to find out the policies and the procedures of the data that we collect, the data that we save, the data that we manipulate and use. There are rules and regulations, and there are people that are assigned to that data. Why is that important? That's important in order that we can trust that data, and that data can be used effectively. So the difficulties of managing data is that since data increases exponentially with time, and we think about it, the more time you're at the university, Michaela, do you think that you're going to have more data? Of course, right? You're going to have more grades you're going to do. You're going to take more courses. You're going to be more involved in more activities. There's also the idea that we have multiple sources of data. We have data internally that we get in the university. For instance, in admissions, where else do we get data? We get data from the registrar. We get data from the health center. We have data from housing. We have data even from parking. You can think about a number of different departments have data. We have the data for the business school, the data from the finance department, from data analytics. And we also have internal data, but also external data. And those new sources of data that we have can come from a variety of places. So if I think about it, Abby, you think the university is interested in data about other universities?
No.
And I'm going to tell you that they are. And why do you and the reason is they want to know what their competitors are doing. Are we the only university that is in the planet? No, right? Students have a choice of where they go to a university. And we're like any other universities. We want what? We want the best students to come to our university, right? And we're nonprofit, but we're a revenue-based university that we need students in order to pay my salary, in order to, have you seen the university? Pretty nice university in terms of what it looks like. It needs upkeep, right? It needs to pay the salaries of its employees, right? It has a number of fountains, and it has a football team, and it has a tennis team. It needs funds to do that. And so they want the best students. They want donors, and they want to see what other universities are doing. So what you think, they wouldn't have any reason for it. They really want it. They may not get all the specific underlining data that they're going to share, but things that are public, things that they can get their handle on. Yeah. Do you think they're interested in finding out what tuition other universities are charging? Abby, now that you think about it?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, because what? Do we want to be so, we don't want to be the cheapest around, right? But we also don't want to be so expensive. Why not? You know, I'm sure the university would like to charge more than less. But after a while, they'll be what? You'll end up saying, hey, I love the university, but I don't want to pay, my parents can't pay that, or I can't get tuitions, or I can't get scholarships enough. So they'll be able to do that. Then they talk about something called data rot. Data rot is when the data is not good anymore. It's almost like rotten food when you think about it, but it's data that I can't rely on. And data degradation is, it's so old, the data, that it's not up to date. Then you think about, why is it difficult to manage the data? Do I have to keep the data secure? When you're at the health center, right, Lauren, if you went to the health center, you expect that your data be secure, that not everybody can hack into the university and get your health data. Your grades, you expect, right, that not everybody can get in and see your grades or manipulate your grades. There has to be quality, and I have to be able to rely on it. It's the same thing with data security. I don't want, do they collect, when you think about Michaela, do they collect credit card information, the university? At all?
No.
Is there anywhere that they collect? Can you use your credit card anywhere on campus?
Most places, I guess.
Yeah, most places you can. So you don't want to be able, right, that your credit card be hacked, right? You don't want your data to be hacked. And guess what? Universities are notorious. Hackers love to get inside the universities, into their databases. So we need to keep these secure. All data in the way we got to figure out. Sometimes universities don't even know they've been hacked. And then there's government regulation. What does it mean, government regulation? For instance, if I'm a bank, Nick, do banks have to follow certain government regulations? Nick?
Am I Nick, or is it Nicholas?
Yeah, you're this Nick, the first.
Okay.
So-
yeah, of course they do.
Right. So there's like a number of basically, if we looked at it, a number of federal regulations, they have to keep a certain amount of money in their reserves, right? They don't want to have a run on the banks. They have to keep it. And so the university even they have like a family act that they have to go for certain student regulations. So there's government regulations that require then certain sectors that have to follow those regulations. And if I think about it, those multiple sources can be, I can think about the university having their own databases, their own documents that they have to keep in track of, right? My students, my faculty, my employees. Think about all the health data that I have, all the doctors, all your health information, the health insurance, all your financial aid, the social security. Also, what else do we need? We need to have basically in terms of what were the payments, what were the revenues. All these are internal sources of the data. Then I have personal experiences. It may be write-ups that people do, recommendations, personal sources, and then there's external talking about, it may be even economic. How is the economic situation in terms of how should I charge? It may be external sources on not only government reports or job reports. So these are internal, personal, and external, and data. Going back to what is data governance? Data governance, if I think about any type of data governance, Jonathan, it's an approach on how I'm going to manage that data or that information across the entire enterprise. And in the university, what does that mean? Across all departments, like the School of all schools, like the School of Business, the School of Music. Do they have their own data, right? The admissions, the registrar, housing, sports team. So data governance is going to say who is responsible for that data, who decides what data gets into the system, who's going to tell when there's any changes made to the data. So Jonathan, in that case, where do you live now? On campus or off campus?
I'm off campus.
Off campus. Did you ever live on campus?
Yeah, last year.
Okay. Does the university need to keep track of where you live? Sure, right?
Yeah.
Could it be that one unit thinks that you're still living on campus, another unit thinks that you're living off campus? There's also an address where your parents live, right? Where you live in the summer. All of that needs to be approached that you need to do it. So there has to be a way to manage that data, and this becomes difficult. You have to have rules to create it, rules to say what is the backup procedures. So let's say we get hacked. What happens? Who are they supposed to report to? If we don't have data governance, it's like, oh, we got hacked. I don't know what to do. Is it my responsibility as a faculty member? What do I know? And who among the university, somebody stole my credit card. Now what do I do? So this approach is called data governance. The other approach that we talk about is the database approach. The database approach means I store my data so it won't be redundant. So I don't have to repeat, in this case, Jonathan, I don't have to repeat your address every time. This way, I'll put it in a database. I'll put it in one central location where it only has to be updated once. So think about it. It doesn't have to be, Jonathan, when you move from on campus to off campus, you didn't have to tell 30 different entities on campus where you're moving to. It should be placed in one place. So the way that you need to know this in terms of the exams and other places, is the idea that they're in database management systems. When we're trying to take the data and to consolidate it, we want to minimize three main problems. One problem is what? We have data redundancy. If I asked you then, Ella, what's an example of data redundancy? You could say then data redundancy is that if you move, that your data, your new address would have to be populated, let's say in 30 different places. What's your major, Ella?
Finance.
Finance. So in the finance department, in the school of business, in the admissions, in the registrar, you see, we can go on and on. In the health center, you don't want to go around in 30 different places to do it. So that's data redundancy. What year are you, Ella?
Sophomore.
And what do you think you want to do with, is there any, you have any idea what you want to do with your finance degree, or what your ideal job would be? What's your ideal kind of, if you thought about it, do you have any idea?
No, I'm not totally sure.
Sure, nobody's totally sure, right? I'm not totally sure myself. So the idea is, if you thought about in the future, is that, let's say there was an intern, somebody came to me and they said, hey, you know what, Dr. Rush, we're looking for an intern and we want that intern to be a finance major and we want to get more women into finance. So we want her to be a female and we want her to be young in her career, a sophomore. And let's say, are you involved in any other activities here on campus, Ella?
Yeah.
Like what?
The real estate and finance club and
Okay, so, and I want her to be in a real estate and finance club. Would I have access to that? Probably not. It just may happen on oh, I remember Ella, right? And I don't even remember Ella's last name. She was, I think she does it. So that's what we call, Ella, data isolation. The data is isolated, that there comes out to be a request and I can't get to the data. That's called data isolation. And data inconsistency in one part of the university, let's say, Ella, it has your address at one place, and then in another part, it has your address in another state. That's called data inconsistency. So these are these are problems that we want to solve with a database management system. And this is what I want to maximize with the database management system. If I can get my data stored in one location, I'll have enhanced data security. If I have it stored in one location, I can assure that my data has more integrity, that I can rely on the data, that I think that my data is accurate. And then another part is that it's data independent. So I, as a faculty member, can also find who is a sophomore, that's a female, that's a finance major, that's also in the finance and real estate club. And they want to do an internship, and they want to also give a scholarship for $10,000, Ella. So maybe you can get that. So that's called what I minimize and what I maximize. And then in the data management system, you can see how it works here. This is the key. Look how this works, Brandon. And if I look at this graph here, if I look at this right here, that right here is the database management system, that I can have the registrar's office, the accounting department, meaning where it gets the revenue for the university, and the athletic department put their data all in the database management system here, so it cannot be redundant. I can rely on that, and it's secure. And from here, you can see I can have course listings come from here. from the athletic teams to student athletes to student fees and student registration. So when we think about data, Dimitri, we think about a data hierarchy. So on a data hierarchy, what I have, you need to know this. And it really is a way in which how data is organized. The lowest part of data is a bit. A bit is really just an on and off switch. It's a 0 or it's a 1. A byte is 8 characters, 8 bits, 0s and 1 that make up 1 character. So if Dimitri, your first letter of your first name is a D, it could have then 8 different types of 0s and 1s. And a field, Dimitri, is like a column in a spreadsheet. And a data file or table, Dimitri, is like a sheet in Excel. And all of and a group of files together make up a database. So if I went, Dimitri, to, I'll just go to courses, right? And we think that data is the data role. So you have 2 versions. In this case, you have 2 versions of data, right? You have BTE210-J. And then if I go to courses, you have BTE210-J audit. And I look at your roles, what's the difference, Dimitri, between the regular J and the audit J? Do you know, Dimitri, what's the difference in roles?
Yeah, so
Your
for the
role.
regular J, I'm just a student. And then
Yes.
for the audit, I have like administrative power.
Exactly. So you have the need to know. Here, you don't need to know what other students are doing. In the audit, I'm requiring you, Dimitri, to know what other students are doing, right? Because you're going to audit them and make sure that they've done a good job, and they're going to audit you, Dimitri, and make sure you've done a good job. So if I go to the audit, we're on a roll, Dimitri. So you want to work with me here? We're on a roll, and if I go down, I can go down in the role here. I can go under users and groups, and I can go under users. And here's a list of users. It looks like what? It says username, first name, last name, email, role, and available. Based, Dimitri, on the hierarchy, you remember we talked about the hierarchy in my PowerPoint? You remember we talked about this? Fields, I said, were like columns. So in this table, how many fields do I have? I have a username, first name, last name, email, role, and available. So it looks like if I take out observer, it looks like I have what? 6 fields. You with me, Dimitri?
Yes.
Good. A row, put this in your notes, and everybody put it in your notes. A row in like a table. This is a table in database terminology, and what we consider to be just like an Excel sheet is a table. The rows are called records. So you can put that in, that if I thought about it, it basically is a record is like a row in a table or sheet. And then what I need is I have something called a primary key. Allows me to pick or select an individual record. If a primary key only can find one record, what among these fields do you think is a primary key? Dimitri.
You kind of lost me there.
Okay, a primary key, good. Listen to this again. A primary key is a unique key that every record in that field is unique, is different. Do you understand what I just said? In the primary key, every record within that key is unique. Why? In order for me to select it. So among so let me ask you
That's
this.
so funny.
Can somebody shut their
Jake Rizzing? How about that?
who's can anybody tell who's
No, you're good. No, if you're dick riding, just say it.
okay.
I was
Make
gonna say,
sure
don't
that
dab me up.
who's on. Is there anybody?
See, RN's right here. RN's only.
Elias, you want to shut your mic? Hmm? So in this case, we'll mute him. Okay. All right, he doesn't realize it, but that's okay. So let's go back here, Dimitri. So Dimitri, a unique primary key is first name a primary key, you think, Dimitri?
So are you saying a primary key holds all these records like on this
No, I'm
page
saying a
of-
primary
like, I'm not
key is
understanding.
unique.
Okay. But
In
what does that
order
have to
for
do with
me,
the
I need a
records?
primary key in order to find a unique record. So if I wanted to find you, Dimitri, I couldn't just say, I'm going to search for Dimitri, because there could be other students that are what? Named Dimitri.
Yeah.
So if I looked at then that database, when I looked at basically, you see my screen here now, when I'm looking at this database, I'm asking what would be, I have to design a database, Dimitri, that will always have a unique key if I want to search for an individual person.
Yeah, so I guess you could use like the C numbers, right? Like the username
Exactly.
column.
Username. Are they unique? Does anyone else in the university have your C number?
No.
No. Like a lot of times they'll use social, right? Sometimes they'll use a combination, but usually you need to have one field called a primary key that allows it to be unique, that you can search then for an individual record. Does that make sense, Dimitri?
Yes.
Yeah. So in this case, so first name wouldn't work, last name wouldn't work, of course, role wouldn't work. I could say, find me all those that were teaching assistants, right? But I'm not going to find one unique person. Now, in somewhere, it could be Dimitri. In this class, you may be the only Dimitri, right? But I can't rest on that because there could be other Dimitris here. And how do you pronounce your last name?
Marco glue.
So in this case, the same thing occurs, right? That I'm not able, you may be the only one, right? But I'm not going to rely on it. So if I go back to it, on this case, you can see then that the hierarchy of data then here's the university database then this is the file. Here's the record, and one record equals a row, Dimitri. So one, if I go back, you can think about this in Excel terms. A row is a record. You can think fields are then what, Dimitri? In an Excel spreadsheet.
Columns, right?
Mhm. And a byte would be, there are many characters within. So if I said first name, there would be how many bytes in there? It would be, in this case, it would be 6 bytes, DIMTRI. And then your D would be a bit. So that's all that is. So what do you really need to know in relational database terms? What it is you see that idea, an attribute can also be like a field, and you need a primary key, and sometimes you have a secondary key. It may not be unique, but you have it together. So have you ever seen something where they'll ask you, oh, what's your birth date and last name or something? So they're trying to get it more so. So when you look at the student database example, you can see here the exact same thing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 fields. And then if I asked you on the test again, Dimitri, what is the primary key?
Primary key would be the student ID.
Perfect. That's it. No big shakes, right? When you know it, it's easy. So in this case, when we talk about all that data, we start talking about big data, which is enormous amounts of data. And we talk about what's the characteristic of the data. What's unique is it's harder to manage that data, but we want to usually forecast the data. So it usually comes to be that we think about that Gartner research. We think that we need to be diverse. We have to have high volume. We have to have high velocity. And basically, we have to have that in order to make better decisions. What's your major, Dimitri?
Finance.
Finance. It's like I could even be like a fortune teller, right? Finance. In terms of giving me insight, giving me processes. And we're going to be using like the stock market data, basically, Dimitri, here, because doesn't it really fit big data? Is it diverse? Yes, I can get it from multiple sources. Is it high volume? My God, yes. Does it come in high speeds? Of course. You blink your eyes and we can get millions of data points, right? And does it require us? Do we want to be able to get some insight and discovery for it? So in our class, in our next examples, we're going to be using that for it. We can have structured. Unstructured is like video. Structured is very much like we saw that user table I got. It was very structured, right, Dimitri? It was C number, and it was first name, last name, email, and role, right? Very structured. Unstructured is if I had if I had video. And then traditionally, that big data, basically, we can capture it in many different formats. We talked about volume, veracity, and this is the big data that we're going to be able to use here, is the idea of a data warehouse and a data mart. The difference between a data warehouse is basically, put this in your notes then, Dimitri, is data warehouse is historical. Did you hear that, Nick? Data warehouse then is historical. We're using it on past data. And we're going to store that past data. It's not going to be a data that we're using on a day-to-day basis. So for present inventory, we're not going to put present inventory in the database. It's past data. And what we're using a data warehouse for in a data mart is to do almost experiments. And so we can do like a student database and try to figure out who is going to be students that will be able to spend 4 years here, and what type of students basically quit after a year. That could be, you see that, Nick? That could then be a data warehouse. We could think about it. Oh, all of a sudden, artificial intelligence is really big. Maybe what we should do is have a minor in artificial intelligence with finance. Let's figure out what is the job market for that. Do people in finance now, when you go, there's a job fair, I think, Wednesday. Anybody goes, is basically you can figure out, do they want artificial intelligence? Oh, maybe we should do then artificial intelligence minor with finance. If that's going to be, that'll be our data mart. So a data warehouse is, you see this, historical in nature. It's organized by subject. And what a data mart is almost like a mini hypothesis, a mini test within a data warehouse. So it's a small version. So basically the data warehouse would be all our data of all our students in the business school, and a data mart would be looking at our finance students and seeing, maybe we'll combine finance with artificial intelligence. So the basics of the warehouse would be, then it has to be organized. It has to be like pivot tables using online analytical programming. We got to get it integrated. We have to be cognizant of the time. So if we had stock data, we have to know 1 year back, 2 years back. We don't want it to be moving all the time because we're going to be using historical data, not present. And we may look at it on a number of different variables. So these are what they call the data warehouse environment. So if you looked at the data warehouse, anything that's cylinder is a database. So you have, these are outside sources. You have, this is the entire data warehouse. An enterprise is like a university. That's the whole organization. And the data mart may be just like the finance AI marketing idea that we have. So we may have a finance data mart, a managing data mart, and a marketing data mart. And then what we'll then do is try to integrate it and make reports and see if we can get some data with it. Questions? So what we'll do on Wednesday, let me stop sharing. What we'll do on Wednesday is to start looking at data, big data, by taking an example of the stock market and looking at automated trading systems. And how do we automate that to make projections and look back in time? And looking back in time, how can we forecast the future? You got it? That's what we'll be doing. So the assignment then is broken down in two parts, where the first part is through the book and the second part is starting to look at automated trading systems. You see that, Dimitri? So did that help? And now I know when I say primary, you know exactly what that means, right? Perfect. Any questions? Let's just do attendance. And then stay with me if you have additional questions. So let me share. Hopefully this will load. Start checking. 1758. Once you checked in, you're welcome to leave. If you want to stay with me, please stay with me. Otherwise, we'll see each other quite soon. Thank you. Enrique, you have any question? Alexa?